The biggest mistake a powerful man can make is believing he already knows the truth. Alexander Voss had spent years building an empire where every detail was carefully controlled. At 42 years old, he was known throughout New York as a man who rarely made mistakes. As the leader of one of the most influential mafia families in the city, Alexander had learned that information was power. He trusted facts, evidence, and careful decisions. Emotions had no place in his world. Every person around him had a reason for being there, and Alexander believed he could recognize those reasons before anyone revealed them. But one night, a single misunderstanding would bring someone into his life who was never supposed to be there. Alexander had been searching for a woman connected to a secret that had remained hidden for years. The information he received pointed him toward one person, someone who carried answers he needed. Everything appeared clear. The identity matched. The circumstances seemed correct. But there was one detail Alexander did not know. He had found the wrong twin. Maya Carter had never planned to enter Alexander Voss's world. She lived a quiet life far away from the power struggles and complicated relationships that surrounded the mafia empire. As a black woman working hard to create stability for herself, Maya understood that life was not always fair, but she had always believed that intelligence and patience could help her overcome difficult situations. She never expected to be pulled into a world where every conversation felt like a test, and every person seemed to be searching for hidden motives. When Maya realized Alexander believed she was someone else, fear was not the only thing she felt. She also understood the danger of revealing the truth too quickly. She did not know why the mistake happened, and she did not know who she could trust. So she made a decision. She would observe. She would listen. She would learn. Alexander immediately noticed that something about Maya did not fit the image he expected. The woman standing before him was calm in situations where others would panic. She asked questions instead of simply accepting orders. She studied the people around her instead of trying to impress them. Those small differences created doubts in Alexander's mind. He had expected someone predictable, but Maya was impossible to read. The more Alexander watched her, the more he wondered if he had missed something important. Maya, meanwhile, knew she was walking through a world where one wrong answer could reveal everything. She had to remember details she never experienced, understand relationships she never knew existed, and convince an entire mafia empire that she was the person they believed her to be. But Maya had something Alexander did not expect. She was not only trying to survive. She was trying to understand the truth behind why she had been brought into this situation. And as the days passed, Alexander began to realize that the woman in front of him was not the person he was searching for. She was something far more complicated. She was the one mystery he could not solve. And for the first time in years, Alexander Voss found himself facing a situation he could not control. Alexander Voss had always believed that people revealed themselves through patterns. The way they spoke, the choices they made, and the reactions they showed under pressure all told a story. That belief had helped him build his reputation and maintain control over a powerful mafia empire. But Maya Carter was different. She did not follow the patterns Alexander expected. Every day she spent inside his world created more questions than answers. Alexander continued watching her carefully, searching for the signs that would confirm his suspicions. The woman he believed he had found was supposed to have a certain personality, certain memories, and certain connections. But Maya's reactions were different. She hesitated at details she should have known and responded with thoughts that did not match the person he believed she was. Instead of making Alexander dismiss her, those differences made him more curious. Maya knew she was being observed. She understood that every conversation mattered and every mistake could expose the truth. She studied the environment around her, learning the names, relationships, and expectations of the people inside Alexander's world. She quickly realized that surviving was not about pretending perfectly. It was about understanding people. Alexander expected fear from those around him, but Maya did not behave that way. She remained respectful, but she also maintained her own confidence. She did not try to challenge his authority, yet she did not disappear into the background either. That balance caught his attention. One evening, Alexander asked Maya a question about her past. It was a simple question, but it carried more weight than she expected. For a brief moment, she felt the pressure of keeping her secret. She knew one wrong answer could change everything. Instead of rushing, She carefully chose her words and redirected the conversation without creating suspicion. Alexander noticed the skill behind her response. He had spent years around people who either said too much or said exactly what they thought he wanted to hear. Maya did something different. She considered her words carefully because she genuinely wanted to understand the situation around her. That made Alexander wonder if there was more to her story than he knew. Meanwhile, Maya began discovering that Alexander was not exactly the person she expected either. She had heard stories about him before entering his world. She imagined someone completely cold and impossible to understand. But behind the reputation was a man who carried the weight of every decision he made. She noticed that Alexander was always calculating, always protecting, and always preparing for problems before they appeared. It did not excuse everything about him, but it helped her understand why he had become the way he was. Their conversations slowly changed. What started as careful questions and cautious answers became moments where both of them revealed small pieces of themselves. Alexander still did not know the truth about Maya, and Maya still could not reveal who she really was. Their connection was built on a strange foundation of secrets and uncertainty. But something unexpected began happening. The more Alexander searched for the person he thought Maya was, the more interested he became in the person standing in front of him. He began realizing that the mystery was not only about her identity. It was about why someone so different from his world could make him question everything he believed about trust. Maya Carter quickly learned that the most dangerous place was not a room full of powerful people. It was a moment when someone powerful started paying attention. Since arriving in Alexander Voss's world, she had carefully avoided drawing unnecessary attention, but that became harder with each passing day. Alexander was no longer simply watching her because he suspected something was wrong. He was watching because he wanted to understand her. That change made Maya more cautious than ever. She knew curiosity could be just as difficult to handle as suspicion. Inside the Voss estate, Maya continued studying the people around her. She noticed how everyone moved carefully around Alexander, choosing their words and waiting for his reactions before speaking. It was clear that his reputation affected every person near him. But Maya also noticed something others seemed to miss. Alexander was not only a man with authority. He was someone who carried constant responsibility. Every decision appeared to weigh on him, and every person who depended on him added another layer to the pressure he carried. Maya never expected to feel sympathy for someone from his world, but she began seeing the person behind the reputation. Alexander noticed changes in Maya as well. She was adapting faster than he expected. She remembered small details, understood conversations, and found ways to navigate situations without making unnecessary mistakes. He had expected someone who would struggle under pressure, but Maya remained calm. That calmness created more questions. One afternoon, Alexander arranged a conversation designed to learn more about her. He asked about her childhood, her interests, and the choices that shaped her life. Maya carefully answered while protecting the truth she could not reveal. She spoke about her experiences honestly, without exposing the identity she was hiding. Alexander listened closely, searching for contradictions. Instead, he found something unexpected. He found a person with genuine thoughts, personal values, and a perspective completely different from his own. Maya also began noticing that Alexander was not as emotionless as everyone believed. Small moments revealed a different side of him. She saw how he remembered details about people who worked with him. She noticed how he valued loyalty and how seriously he took his responsibilities. The world around him was complicated, but his actions showed that there were reasons behind the choices he made. This did not erase the differences between them, but it made Maya realize that understanding someone required looking beyond first impressions. Their conversations became more frequent, and the distance between them slowly changed. They were still surrounded by secrets. Maya was still hiding the truth about who she really was, and Alexander was still searching for answers. But between those secrets, something unexpected started forming. They began seeing each other as individuals instead of simply representing opposite sides of a situation. For Alexander, Maya became a question he could not ignore. For Maya, Alexander became someone far more complicated than the person she expected to meet. However, outside their conversations, the pressure around them continued growing. People inside the Mafia empire began noticing that Alexander was treating Maya differently. Some questioned why a woman with such an unclear background had gained his attention. Maya realized that hiding the truth from Alexander was only part of the challenge. She also had to convince everyone around him that she belonged in a world where she was never supposed to exist. And as the questions increased, Maya understood that the secret she carried could not remain hidden forever. Maya Carter understood that every person inside the Voss estate had a reason for watching her. Some were curious, some were suspicious, and others were simply waiting for her to make a mistake. She had entered Alexander Voss's world by accident, but staying there required more than keeping a secret. It required understanding the people, the expectations, and the invisible rules that controlled everything around her. Maya knew she could not pretend forever, so she focused on one thing she trusted most: her ability to observe and adapt. Alexander noticed her approach. Unlike many people who entered his world, Maya was not trying to gain his approval or impress those around her. She paid attention, learned quickly, and handled difficult moments with a calm confidence that surprised him. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him, but Maya seemed more interested in understanding the situation than using it for personal advantage. That difference stayed in his mind. As days passed, Alexander began involving Maya in more conversations. He wanted to see how she thought, how she handled information, and how she responded when situations became complicated. Each time, she showed a level of patience and awareness that did not match the person he believed he had brought into his world. Instead of becoming frustrated by the mystery, Alexander became more determined to uncover it. Maya also began discovering more about Alexander's life. She saw the pressure that came with leading an entire empire. She noticed how every decision affected the people around him and how rarely he allowed himself a moment of peace. The image others had of him was powerful and intimidating, but the person Maya saw was someone who carried a responsibility most people never understood. That realization created a conflict inside her. She knew Alexander was still the reason she was trapped in this situation, but she also recognized that he was more complicated than the stories she had heard. One evening, Maya found herself in a conversation with Alexander that felt different from the others. There were no questions about her identity, no attempts to uncover hidden information. Instead, they discussed choices, regrets, and the paths that led them to where they were. Alexander admitted that trust was difficult for him because his position required constant caution. Maya understood that feeling more than he expected. She explained that sometimes people hide parts of themselves not because they want to deceive others, but because they are afraid of what will happen if the truth changes everything. Her words stayed with Alexander long after the conversation ended. For the first time, he wondered if Maya's secret came from a place of fear rather than dishonesty. Meanwhile, Maya realized that the longer she stayed, the harder it became to see Alexander as only the man who brought her there. She saw his flaws, but she also saw his humanity. That made the situation even more difficult because she knew the truth about her identity could change everything between them. Outside their growing connection, the pressure inside the Mafia empire continued increasing. People began asking questions about Maya, wondering why Alexander trusted her presence when so many details remained unclear. Maya knew the time would come when she would have to face the truth she was hiding. Until then, she had one goal: remain careful, remain observant, and find a way to survive without losing herself in a world that was never meant for her. Maya Carter knew that secrets became heavier the longer they were carried. When she first entered Alexander Voss's world, she believed the hardest part would be convincing everyone that she was someone else. But now she understood that the greatest challenge was something different. It was the fact that every day she spent near Alexander made it harder to remember that she was only pretending. She had expected to see a man defined by power and control, but she discovered someone who was far more complicated. Alexander had spent years building walls around himself, and Maya was beginning to understand why those walls existed. Alexander continued searching for answers about the woman he believed Maya was. He reviewed old information, compared details, and tried to understand why certain parts of her story did not match what he knew. The more he investigated, the more questions appeared. He noticed that Maya had the same appearance as the person he was searching for, but her personality, memories, and reactions were different. Instead of confirming his assumptions, the differences created uncertainty. For the first time in years, Alexander had to consider the possibility that his information was incomplete. Maya saw the change in him. The man who once seemed certain, about everything was beginning to question his own judgment. She realized that Alexander was not only trying to discover the truth about her, he was also trying to understand how he could have been wrong. That was something difficult for a person like him to accept. Maya knew she should keep her distance, but she also recognized the honesty behind his search. Alexander was not looking for an easy answer. He wanted the truth. During a quiet conversation, Alexander asked Maya about the importance of family. The question surprised her because it was not connected to the identity he believed she had. It felt personal. Maya carefully answered, explaining that family could be complicated and that sometimes people protected each other by making difficult choices. Alexander listened without interrupting. Her answer made him think about his own family and the responsibilities that shaped his entire life. He began seeing that Maya's decisions were not always about hiding something. Sometimes they were about protecting something important. At the same time, Maya learned more about the history behind Alexander's empire. She discovered that his position came with expectations he could never ignore. Many people depended on his decisions, and every mistake could affect more than just himself. She started seeing why he valued control so much. For Alexander, control was not only about power. It was about preventing uncertainty. Yet Maya represented the one thing he could not predict. She was a person who entered his world through a mistake, but somehow became the one person who challenged his understanding of trust. As their conversations continued, the space between them changed. They were still carrying secrets, and the truth about Maya's identity remained hidden. But the connection between them was no longer based only on suspicion. There was curiosity, respect, and a growing understanding that neither of them expected. However, Maya knew the truth could not stay hidden forever. The closer Alexander became to discovering who she really was, the greater the risk became. She had entered his world by accident, but now she faced a choice that could change everything. Continue protecting the secret that kept her safe, or reveal the truth and risk losing the only person who had started seeing her for who she truly was. The truth had always been something Maya Carter carefully protected, but she was beginning to realize that secrets did not only separate people. Sometimes they created a distance that became harder to cross with every passing day. She entered Alexander Voss's world because of a mistake, believing her only goal was to survive until she found a way out. But somewhere along the way, things became more complicated. Alexander was no longer just the person who believed she was someone else. He had become someone who listened to her, respected her thoughts, and saw qualities in her that others often ignored. That made the truth she carried feel heavier than ever. Alexander continued searching for answers, but his approach had changed. At first, he wanted to prove that something was wrong. Now, he wanted to understand why. He reviewed every detail connected to Maya's arrival and the identity he believed she had. The more information he gathered, the clearer it became that the situation was not as simple as he originally thought. There were missing pieces, unanswered questions, and details that suggested someone had made a mistake long before Maya entered his life. Maya noticed that Alexander was becoming less focused on control and more focused on understanding. It was a change she never expected. The man who once seemed impossible to surprise was now willing to admit that he did not have every answer. For Maya, that was a sign of something important. Behind the powerful image of Alexander Voss was a person capable of learning and changing. One evening, Alexander and Maya had a conversation about choices and consequences. Alexander admitted that his entire life had been built around making decisions that protected the people depending on him. He explained that uncertainty was something he struggled with because every unknown factor could create problems. Maya understood because she had also spent much of her life preparing for situations she could not control. She told him that sometimes people spend so much time protecting themselves that they forget to allow others to truly know them. Her words stayed with Alexander because they reflected something he had avoided for years. Maya also began facing her own emotions. She knew she should focus only on leaving and revealing the truth when the opportunity was right. But she could not ignore the fact that Alexander had shown her a side of himself that few people probably saw. He was not only the powerful figure everyone respected. He was someone who carried responsibilities, doubts, and expectations that shaped every part of his life. Their connection became more complicated because it was built between two people who were both hiding something. Alexander was hiding the parts of himself he considered weaknesses. Maya was hiding the truth about her identity. Yet despite those secrets, they continued finding moments of honesty. Outside their conversations, the pressure inside the Mafia empire increased. People around Alexander became more curious about Maya and why she had gained his attention. Some questioned whether she truly belonged in their world. Maya understood that the longer she stayed, the more difficult it would become to maintain the identity everyone believed. She had entered Alexander's life because of a misunderstanding, but now she faced a deeper challenge. She had to decide whether protecting the secret was worth risking the trust they had built. And as Alexander moved closer to discovering the truth, Maya realized that the greatest uncertainty was no longer whether she could survive his world. It was whether she could survive losing the connection they had created. The closer Alexander Voss came to discovering the truth, the more Maya Carter realized that the secret she had protected from the beginning was no longer the only thing at risk. When she first entered his world, she believed the biggest challenge would be convincing everyone that she was the person they expected. But now, the situation had changed. The greatest challenge was facing the possibility that the one person she needed to keep away from the truth was also the one person she trusted the most. Alexander had always believed that answers could be found through careful observation and logical decisions. But Maya had become the one situation he could not solve with information alone. The more he learned about her, the more he realized that she did not fit the image he had created in his mind. She was not someone seeking power or trying to take advantage of his position. She was someone who had been placed in an impossible situation and was trying to navigate it with patience and intelligence. That realization changed the way Alexander viewed her. Instead of seeing Maya as a mystery he needed to uncover, he began seeing her as a person who deserved to be understood. Maya noticed the difference. Alexander was still careful, still observant, and still someone who carried authority wherever he went. But he was no longer treating her like a problem waiting to be solved. He was listening to her. He was considering her opinions. And that made hiding the truth even harder. During a quiet evening, Alexander asked Maya what she would do if she had the chance to start over somewhere completely different. The question caught her off guard because it was not about the identity he believed she had. It was about her. Maya thought carefully before answering. She explained that starting over was not always about leaving the past behind. Sometimes it was about finding a place where a person could finally be honest about who they were. Alexander understood more than she expected. He admitted that despite everything he had built, there were moments when he wondered if people respected him or only respected the position he held. Maya saw the honesty behind his words. It was a side of Alexander that few people probably experienced. She realized that both of them were carrying the same fear in different ways. They were both afraid that the truth about them would change how others saw them. As their connection grew stronger, Maya began noticing how Alexander treated people around him. She saw that he remembered small details, valued loyalty, and carried responsibility for those who depended on him. The powerful image surrounding him was only part of the story. There was another side that existed beneath the reputation. Alexander also began seeing Maya differently. He admired her ability to remain calm, her willingness to understand before judging, and her strength when facing uncertainty. She had entered his life through a mistake, but she had become the one person who challenged his beliefs about trust. However, the world around them was becoming less patient. Questions about Maya continued spreading throughout the Mafia empire. People wanted to know who she really was and why Alexander had allowed her so close. Maya knew the truth could no longer remain hidden forever. The moment she had feared was approaching. Soon, Alexander would have to choose whether the secret mattered more than the person standing in front of him. And Maya would have to decide whether honesty was worth risking the only connection she never expected to find. The moment Maya Carter had been preparing for finally arrived when the truth she had protected began moving closer to the surface. For weeks, she had managed to survive inside Alexander Voss's world by observing, learning, and carefully choosing every word she spoke. But now, the distance between the secret she carried and the reality around her was becoming smaller. She knew that eventually Alexander would discover that she was not the person he believed her to be. What she did not know was whether he would see her actions as deception or understand why she made the choices she made. Alexander had always believed that trust was earned through honesty. His entire life had been built around recognizing hidden intentions and protecting himself from unexpected situations. Yet Maya had created a situation he never experienced before. She had entered his life under the wrong identity, but everything he learned about her afterward came from genuine moments. The kindness she showed, the intelligence she demonstrated, and the way she treated people around her were real. Alexander found himself questioning whether the original mistake mattered more than the person he had come to know. Maya also began understanding something important about Alexander. The man who appeared impossible to reach was not without emotions. He simply spent years protecting himself behind responsibility and control. He carried the expectations of an entire mafia empire, but he rarely allowed anyone to see the pressure behind that role. Maya realized that Alexander was not only trying to protect his power, he was trying to protect everything and everyone connected to him. That realization made her decision even more difficult. One evening, Alexander confronted Maya with questions that showed he already knew something was missing from her story. He did not accuse her or demand answers immediately. Instead, he asked her why someone would hide the truth if they were not trying to harm anyone. Maya was surprised by the question because she expected anger or disappointment. Instead, she saw uncertainty. Alexander was trying to understand before making a judgment. For the first time, Maya considered that perhaps the truth would not automatically destroy everything between them. She explained that sometimes people hide parts of themselves because they fear losing the only place where they feel accepted. Alexander listened carefully, and her words affected him more than he expected. He realized that he had spent years asking people to prove their loyalty while rarely giving them a reason to feel safe enough to be honest. Meanwhile, the people inside the mafia empire continued watching the situation closely. They noticed the connection between Alexander and Maya, and they questioned why someone with such an unclear background had earned his trust. The pressure surrounding them increased, and Maya knew the choice could no longer be delayed. She could continue protecting the identity that brought her into this world, or she could finally reveal the truth and accept whatever followed. Alexander also faced a decision of his own. He had spent his entire life believing that information was everything. But Maya had taught him something different. Sometimes understanding a person mattered more than understanding the circumstances that brought them into your life. The truth about Maya was about to change everything, but neither of them realized that the biggest surprise was not the secret itself. It was what Alexander would choose after learning it. The truth Maya Carter had carried from the beginning was finally revealed, but the moment she expected to end everything became the moment that changed everything. She stood before Alexander Voss and admitted that she was not the person he originally believed her to be. She explained that she was the wrong twin, that she had never intended to enter his world, and that every decision she made afterward came from trying to understand a situation she never chose. Maya did not ask for forgiveness. She simply wanted Alexander to know the truth. For a moment, Alexander said nothing. The man who had built his entire life around information and certainty was facing the one thing he could not calculate. He had spent so much time searching for the truth that he never considered what he would do when the truth finally arrived. Alexander thought about every conversation they shared, every moment when Maya showed honesty even while hiding her identity, and every time she chose understanding over fear. He realized that although her arrival was based on a mistake, the person he came to know was real. Maya had never pretended to be someone better than herself. She had simply tried to survive a situation that was beyond her control. Alexander finally understood that the most important part of her story was not how she entered his life. It was what she brought into it. She challenged his beliefs, changed the way he viewed trust, and reminded him that people could not be defined by a single circumstance. Maya also realized something about herself. For so long, she believed her only goal was to escape the situation and return to the life she knew. But during her time with Alexander, she discovered that she had gained something unexpected. She had found confidence in her own abilities and learned that her voice mattered. She was no longer only trying to prove she belonged in a world that was unfamiliar to her. She understood that she had always carried the strength needed to face difficult moments. The people around Alexander eventually learned the truth, and the situation forced everyone to reconsider their assumptions about Maya. She was not the person they expected, but she had earned their respect through her actions, patience, and character. Alexander made a choice that surprised many people. Instead of focusing only on the mistake that brought Maya into his life, He focused on the person she had become while standing beside him. He chose to value honesty, loyalty, and the connection they had built. Their story was never about a perfect situation or an easy beginning. It was about two people who entered each other's lives through uncertainty and discovered something meaningful in the process. Alexander had spent years believing that control was the foundation of strength. Maya showed him that trust required even greater courage. Maya had spent years believing she had to handle everything alone. Alexander showed her that accepting support did not make her less capable. Together, they proved that unexpected moments could create unexpected futures. The woman who was never supposed to enter his world became the person who helped him see beyond power and reputation. And the man who once believed every answer could be found through control finally learned that some of the most important truths are discovered through understanding.